the audience, but sometimes the folks over here, Joe or Elaine.
I think they forget to turn
Yeah.
the mic on. But sometimes I look down and I can be a pretty loud speaker.
The audience, but sometimes the folks over here.
Yep.
Good morning. Call to order this meeting of the Finance Committee of Newtown Township. Okay, quick roll call. Mr. Skoukis. Here. Ms. Pacell.
Here.
Mr. Fisher.
Here.
Mr. Nabels.
Here.
Okay. We'll take a moment for a moment of silence. Okay, let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty. As a reminder, this is our last meeting of the year. We are taking off our last meeting for book burning. Oh, no, actually, I have to move the books into this room. I knew something about books. Sorry, I get confused about those things sometimes. Anti-fascism stuff. Okay. So real quick, may I have a motion, please, to consider approving the agenda for this meeting of November 17th? Okay, second.
Second.
Any debate, discussion?
No.
All in favor, say
Aye.
opposed. Consider the minutes approved. Okay.
Is that the minutes or the agenda?
I'm sorry, the agenda. My apologies. I've done the next thing already. So may I have a motion, please, to consider approving the minutes from the October 2021 meeting? Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, let's move on to reports. October. Sorry.
Sure. So like I always do, I want to go over roughly some things that happened over the past month. Instead of keep repeating myself every month, I just want to come out and say the same things that have been driving the variances all year are still going to drive the variances. So you might hear me repeat some of the same things I've been repeating over the same months, but that's because that is the variance that's what's causing the variance. So as of October, revenues are ahead 982,000 and expenses are ahead 972,000 for a net increase of approximately 98,000. I'm sorry, of about, what is that, 10,000? Of the increase in expenses of 218,000, 23% is due to the transfer in capital. Everybody remembers in 2020, there was a freeze in capital. There's no freeze in 2021. So 23% of our increases in expenses are due to capital. Even though it's transferred, like I said before, it doesn't mean it's actually expense. It just shows an expense in the general fund because we moved it over to the capital fund. So real estate taxes are up approximately $87,000. There's still about $109,000 left to collect. And putting that into comparison, there was about $167,000 to collect in 2020. So we're ahead. That makes sense because we billed approximately $50,000 to $60,000 more in 2021 than we did in 2020 because of the new growth. So that's right on track.
Rich, how does that compare to prior year? You said we were, do that again.
So we're 109,000 to collect now.
Right, and the
And
last
we're
year was
100, we were 167 last year. So
how did we close last year with that 167?
we always lean the uncollected, hand over to the county between 40 and 60,000. We're right on track where we are with other years. Steve and I actually looked at it yesterday, our real estate collection rates. We are, I don't want to say extremely stable. We are stable.
I know you look at the
in-
percentage as
Yeah.
compared to the hard dollars.
Yeah, overall, we're projecting to end the year exactly where we were,
Got it.
the same collection rate as we've been in the
We-
past.
Just so that you kind of understand, we typically budget about a 97% collection rate. However, over the last 3 years, 4 years, I think we look back, we're like 98 to 99% collection rate. And so, you know, I would have thought last year was a potential to be one of those years if we were going to fall behind, we would have fallen behind. Actually, last year we did actually better than the year before. So collection percentage wise, we've been doing incredibly well. And it's a very high percentage.
Pardon the way my brain works, but what percentage of residents do you budget paying in the discount period?
So that's about 10%.
No.
Yeah. There's 90,000. I don't have a calculator on me. I know the numbers. I don't know the percentage.
I
off
think
the
we
top of my head.
budget close to 90% paying in the discount.
Yeah.
Give me the numbers, I can plug it in.
So this one, so 98 is 98% of what was
I'm
budgeted,
sorry,
which
10%
is,
discount.
Yeah.
okay, got it.
Yeah, most people pay during the discount. And so we have, when we budget on the line item, I don't know if the line item's in here this night. But when we budget on the line item, we actually budget a discount, a line item, and it's typically about 110,000 or something like that, 110, 120.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
So that's kind of what we anticipate, and that's really been pretty steady. There's a couple years that it goes up and down. I think last year we were a little behind during discount period, but by the end of the year, we were at the same spot.
Thank you.
So that's what's going on with real estate taxes. The major variance that you're going to see, the 815,000, comes from our other taxes. As I've been talking about, the real estate market has been going crazy with the sales as well as the value of the sales. So our transfer tax is up about $116,000. 395 of it was from the transfer of the mainline health building early this year. And then we actually received 190,000 from the transfer of the apartments as well. So if you take those two into account and you look at the variance and what we budgeted, we're actually, if you take the two one-time revenue sources out, we're right on track with where we budgeted. And that's where we plan on ending the year. No other big transfers or anything like that. The other major decreases you'll see, or decrease you'll see, is interest, about $20,000 down in interest. We obviously took that into account in budgeting for next year. Interest rates just aren't where they were in 2020. And the other main revenue variance you're going to see is the 145,000 in other financing sources. As we spoke about before, this is due to the school resource officer working more hours in 2021 than in 2020. The board asked us to open up a conversation with the school district, and we're continuing that conversation about getting some reimbursement back for when the officer was not stationed at the school for COVID-related reasons. So overall, those are your main revenue variances. On the expense side, like I said, it's up about 972,000. But most of it is accounted for two reasons. One is your transfer to capital, and your other is your $506,000 debt service payment that has since moved to the liquid fuels fund, because now we have liquid fuels funds opened. So that 506,000 is not in the 2022 budget, but the offsetting use of fund balance is it. So it's kind of a wash at the end of the day when it impacts the budget. So overall, those are your main variances from October of 2020 to 2021. If anybody had any questions, I'm more than happy to.
Notice in the comments on your revenue by source, lay out the Ellis Preserve permitting fee. The amount is, if I can read it, 574, I think, 574,000. Is that basically wound down at this point, meaning that we're not going to see that type of a transaction going forward?
So that's one of the one-time permit sources that we always say. We say we should budget to a level with the ongoing permit.
Right.
That would be something that we would consider the one-time permit revenue. That's not an ongoing
Right.
source. Steve might know a little bit better if there's any really large permits coming down the.
So we know that phase 2, which is the part that if people drive by Ellis Preserve right now and they see all of the dirt and all of the
Mountains.
mountains of different piles of pipe and concrete that came out of the site and dirt and all of those kind of things, that is going to continue through next year. A lot of the pad sites will be being delivered to the different commercial entities that are coming in. What I'm hearing, that's all going to, pretty much be set during next year.
So we're seeing residential build out now, and we're going to see commercial build out.
Probably
is the last phase.
It's probably in the spring, maybe into the summer. It'll probably take a year and a half to kind of do all of that. That's what I anticipate.
And the permits associated with that commercial build out will start to occur 2022 or thereabouts.
That's what we're anticipating, but probably once that's done, to be honest with you, we're going to see a pretty significant drop off in permanent revenue. Because, I mean, unless there's somebody else that jumps in and does a major project, and there is a developer in town that could,
right.
But unless he pulls the trigger, I think we're going to start going back to more of what we saw prior to 2012. We've had this window,
right,
and it may continue through 2023, but we're looking at seeing that change somewhere in the next couple of years, just what we know. Obviously things can change, but that's what we're looking at. I do anticipate that there will be some redevelopment in some areas over the next couple of years as well, just because I think that if some of the areas are going to survive, they're going to have to. And just to give you an example, Campus Boulevard is one of those areas. If you drive down Campus Boulevard right now and you look around and you can see there's not a lot of cars there in the middle of the day. And so there's going to have to be a change of how that area
whether
functions,
it goes from commercial to residential,
or how that happens. What the zoning allows and what all that is. But what is
all zoned commercially?
It is all zoned actually office. It's not even zoned commercial. So
okay.
there's going to be some challenges. We're going to have to really look at that because that's going to be one of those things that what I don't think we're going to see coming from the pandemic is a real surge
back into the office.
The office. I think we're going to see. I mean, I've been reading a lot of articles that just say people are really happy working from home at least a major portion of the time.
Yeah, my mother.
In general, that Campus Boulevard complex, is it owned principally by one or two owners, or is it really widely held?
I believe there's one group that probably owns like 3 or 4 buildings and another group that owns 2, but then after that, maybe 3. There's a couple that own a couple buildings,
So
but
it's pretty widely held.
I think there's 17 buildings. I always get it wrong.
Yeah, so do I.
But there's a number of buildings over there, and I think you're looking at probably close to 10 different owners.
Got it. So if a gorilla came in to do a big project, they'd still have to buy out the other.
So there's one more thing that I wanted to add to my reports this month. I just wanted to take time to introduce our first public comment in how many years have we been doing this? Mr. Greco has come to the township. He is from Greenwich, Connecticut.
Oh,
I'm going
Greenwich.
to step up and say something. He has expressed some interest in helping the township out.
Yeah.
Helping the township out with item, I guess it would be 7.3, setting some goals and some performance measures for us. So I just want to take the time to introduce Mr. Greco, and if you give me 1 second. Name and address for the board.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Greco is my name. Reside at 130 Camelot in Springton Point Lake, Woods, I guess. I'm so new to the area, I can't even get that wrong. But I came, we moved to the township about 14 months ago. And I retired from the municipal operation in the town of Greenwich. I retired one day and 2 days later we moved. My wife did all the work. Anyway, I was with the town for almost 20 years, and before that, heavily involved in a corporation that's no longer in existence. I was involved in at the town of Greenwich as assistant director of Parks and Recreation, operating with 62,000 residents, all entitled. And so very much aware of service to the community. I mean, that's really important. Excuse me. Had about 100 full-time employees and almost 300 part-time employees. And so I'm kind of familiar with what it takes to run an operation like the township, although there are differences. And it seems like every day I'm getting accustomed to new things. It's an incredible area. Folks are great. And I'm really happy to be part of the operation.
Thank you. Okay, any other, any comments or anything else on the reports?
That is it.
Anybody? All right, let us move on to new business. The October monthly reports, recommendation to present it to the Board of Supervisors. So may I have a motion to do so?
I'll make a motion to present the October monthly reports to the Board of Supervisors.
Second? Second. All in, any discussion?
This would be the four header sheets, what we're talking about.
Yeah, these,
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what we
Okay.
typically do.
Yes.
We also do the detail sheets behind it.
Right, okay.
the only comment I guess I was thinking in my head, and I may as well say it now, but I don't think it's necessary for this year, is it would be helpful to see a forecast column at, you know, if we know where where the year is going to end up. But it's not necessary. I think what we're saying here is that we expect to end right around our budget, right?
We do a forecast as part of the budget process.
Right.
So when we're presenting the budget, one of the things that we spend a fair amount of time looking at is where we think we're going to end this year,
Mhm.
so that we can kind of talk about two things. One is are there dollars that are available, particularly we've been using those for capital going forward. And then the other piece of that would be, you know, it helps us to know, are we really kind of budgeting close to where we're actually spending? One of the challenges that we have is that several of the department heads, you know, particularly in the areas like public works and things like that, where you just don't know what's going to come up. They tend to wait to the very end of the year to do some purchasing, particularly if it's things that they need, but they're kind of always saving for that oh crud moment, you know, when something breaks, it's really bad, instead of necessarily buying just maintenance parts and as we go. And so there is a period like right here where Rich and I are like, are you really spending what you have? Or are you, you know, is this?
Oh, you sandbagging?
Yeah, and the need is there. And so they'll buy a lot of maintenance parts that we end up using really the first part of next year. But they hold that dollar, and, you know, some years we hit it in February, like, you know, something breaks really early on and you're glad that they had held, you know, a little bit back, you know, through the process. So we just have to kind of manage to that, you know, from a dollar standpoint. And then, of course, I have some other departments that, you know, they got their money in
January 1st, it's out the door.
So you have to balance all of that. And we do have a requirement that until we start collecting taxes, the big expenses don't happen. And we just did, we've kind of held that kind of, you know, since I've been here, you know, we get through at least March before we start really looking at that. So we could do that in projections going forward, but we would probably say, I would probably say to you, we probably wouldn't do really good projections until at least after June.
Right, and I would just suggest for this last meeting that it would, you know,
Yeah.
that would be nice to see, because we're gonna close the year and we won't see each other again, so.
Yeah.
But I don't think, that all being said, I think the reports are fine the way they are. There's nothing significant that is expected, so I don't think it's necessary this time around.
Okay.
Something I was
We will
thinking.
definitely look at that as going forward.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of presenting or having the October monthly reports presented to the Board of Supervisors, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Yeses. Now, on to other new business. These next two things are things that I brought up different venues recently. First one is the concept of payments in lieu of taxes, also referred to as pilot taxes, pilot payments. Just as a quick definition so everybody understands, there are, I'll call them not for companies that have been designated as not-for-profit or nonprofit businesses that exist in every municipality on the planet, or at least in this country. Some of those are entities that are purely nonprofit entities. Some of them are not. In any regard, those entities, because of their designation, and I'm not going to get into the details and the legal definitions of them, do not pay any local real estate taxes. Now, some of those entities absorb or take on township services, some to a fairly significant amount. Now, a famous story around pilot taxes is in the city of Philadelphia, where the University of Pennsylvania pays a significant amount of money, into millions every year, to the city, even though Penn has its own police force and a lot of its own services. It believes it should be a good corporate citizen and make those payments to support the city. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is twofold. One is, it's always been one of those things on my head that said, man, that's a big ass piece of property over there. No, they probably don't pay any taxes. We know the school district does not pay any real estate taxes. There's a reason why. However, there are other entities that do not. And it's always been one of those back of the mind things for me, even before I came here. Then recently, I believe it's the county has identified maybe about a dozen or so entities that, you know, are designated as nonprofit entities, but operate as profitable businesses. So that also propelled my thinking. So my question for this group in our discussion today is, A, we have significant landholders in this township that are so designated, do not pay any type of real estate taxes or consideration. And, you know, I think it's incumbent upon us to think about whether A, we need to investigate that, and B, whether we need to do something about it. Now, I'm not going to call out any business and entity. No, it's not right for me to do that because it's an opinion, right? However, There are several places in the township that I know, even though they're designated as nonprofit businesses, A, operate for a profit, and B, have been able to structure themselves in a way that they're considered to be nonprofit businesses. Even though they sell services. I'll give you a good example. I play golf down at Lanark and Hamilton. We are a nonprofit entity. Okay? We're nonprofit because we structure ourselves such, and people who are not members of the club are not allowed to use the facilities of the club unless they're either a guest of a member or they buy it through a wedding or through a golf outing or something. But we still don't turn a profit. We turn everything back into the business. We're very careful about how we do it because that's the most important element that we have in our structure. I know, for example, that there are other large landowners in this, and I'm not talking about around here, by the way, so, that skirt that policy because of the way they leverage their resources. Because I've been a customer of those places and I understand the way it happens. So that's my proviso. So my question for us is, how do we handle that? I don't think it's a county thing. The county's doing it because it's political headlines, and they're going after the solid waste authority, which I thought was pretty interesting because my hunch is that was some type of quasi-governmental entity, but the county's going after that because they got a hunch something's going on there. You know what? That's the county's business. It's done in the town below us.
But if you're a nonprofit, you don't have to pay property taxes?
See, that's where the structural thing becomes interesting for me. I think it's the use of the property which comes in. So if you're a golf club, for example, you know, it's the nature of how we're structured as an entity that we do not have to pay any taxes on a property for the property. Okay. Now, again, there are places that are big consumers of city services that have stepped up and said, you know what, we should pay money. For example, I don't have to do it right there with Villanova, but I'm sure Villanova does something. And, you know, again, the term is payment in lieu of taxes. And again, it's a way of being a good citizen. My question is, are these large landowners paying any pilot payments? Two, if they're not, what do we do about that? And three, are there places that really are not nonprofit businesses that are operating with that status? Because our goal here is to advise the supervisors not only on things like expenses and better ways to run meetings and things like that, but it's also, frankly, to make them aware of things that we should be collecting every nickel that's owed to this township, or should be paid to the township because it's the right thing to do by these landowners. Any opinions? I certainly have one.
I have a comment just on the pilot as a whole, which is, I have seen it because they require audits at times. Well, when we're doing tax audits, we'll see the pilot payments. I've seen them where in housing authority situations, and I've seen them in university situations. I don't know that I've seen other nonprofits.
Well, there's been a big story was it a banner story in the county press 2 days ago?
Oh, was there really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Delaware County is pursuing, as well as the municipal authority, the waste authority, they're pursuing Springfield Country Club, the
That was the other
restaurant
one.
in there,
Yes. Yeah.
and they're pursuing the marina down in Ridley Park.
Because these guys, Springfield Country Club, for example, is a good example. Springfield Country Club is a municipal golf course owned by the township. That's the only thing that's owned by the township. There are for-profit entities operating on that property, significant for-profit.
So the restaurant that's in there, Taverna, it's Taverna. Taverna has a lease to use that space, and they use it as a restaurant for profit.
Correct. And then there's also a catering operation run through
That is correct.
Yeah. So to your point, that's pretty interesting that they brought it up as well. Here's our challenge, right? We're going to be in a revenue constrained environment because of a number of different reasons, primarily driven by political reasons. Good thing about this group of 5 people is we don't care about politics. We don't have to care about politics. A lot of other people do, and I understand that and I respect that. However, we're going to look at some significant cost increases because of just pure supply chain issues. I don't want to be buying rock salt anytime soon. And things like that, especially if it starts to snow. So we have to go find all the revenues we can.
Can we just get a, I mean, let's not be around, but can we just get a list of all the landowners that don't pay taxes?
Yeah, and we can provide that.
We
I
should
mean,
publish that. The public should know.
Well,
that
yeah,
here's the list.
you gotta open a door there, though.
What?
And that's really,
It's a fact.
no, I understand. If there should be public disclosure of that, of the tax rolls, I think the Board of Supervisors has to be a part of that decision process.
No, 'cause
I don't believe tax rolls are published, are they, Steve? They're not a public record.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
I
you
think
can go on the
for
county
sure. You can go
website
on
and
the
get
county.
it,
I was
yeah.
gonna say, I was gonna say, I think you can go on the county website.
County website.
Yeah, I mean,
And it would show designation of anyone who is not for profit.
yeah, so for example, I mean, just so, I mean, in being transparent, so I'll do that. Most churches fall under that position, that they do not pay taxes on their property in that way. Most schools fall under that. All utilities fall under that. So, you know, if Pico owns property, if Aqua owns property, those properties are exempt from taxes.
We just get a list.
Yeah, we can get
Okay,
it.
that's-
And I guess my question is this, I understand the legacy of those things.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue whether a church should pay taxes. You know, it's not my question is, there are instances and examples, and there are a lot of them, where entities say, you know what? We eat a lot of services from this township.
Mhm.
You know, the police come here, the police patrol this. There's value in what this township provides to us. We should do something about that.
Mhm.
Okay, so for example, you know, I know that there are times when, you know, township resources are used by these facilities over time in a significant way. Do they show up and they do anything with consideration to that? My answer, I almost guarantee the answer is no. Okay? And I have no data to support that. But and I'm not saying we go in there and squeeze people either. However, I think it's something that the public deserves to be aware of. And the public also deserves to be aware of, you know, we need to let the supervisors know this is something they should be aware of. Because again, if we're talking about, we only have $5 million a year of change coming into this township in revenues every year. That's not a lot. And we run our budget so tight, there's not a lot of variance there. It's not like we're netting 30% a year and sending these guys on an incentive trip for doing such a great job managing business. So we need to figure out ways to generate as many revenues.
Where are we going?
I was gonna say, you could make that recommendation, but
Well, especially with the permit and transaction type fees, the forecast for those is decline.
Yeah.
You gotta step back and say, well, are we just gonna cut everything, or is there other revenue sources?
Is there any entity that's nonprofit that makes donation to the township?
We have 3 organizations that actually make pilot payments today.
Who are they?
Episcopal gives a $10,000 a year towards, and theirs is designated towards the fire as part of their land development plan. So it's designated towards fire services.
Suburban Seahawks.
Suburban Seahawks. They give, the total is about $13,000.
$13,000.
And we know 10 comes from Episcopal.
And
What's the third one?
The third one is one of the churches. I actually tried to look it up yesterday because Steve and I were just talking about it. The check comes in from the school district. It's a little bizarre. I just got to dive a little bit deeper to figure it out, but it's one of the churches.
we have to pay commission to the school district for giving us the money. So my question is, exactly. And by no means do I question the fact that they give that $13,000, and we appreciate that. Thank you, Bud. My recommendation is,
We can come up for a list for you. We'll have a list for your January meeting
okay,
of the properties that we know as of today that don't. And we will give you also the list of who pays pilots and what that is so that you can see it.
And again, I appreciate the fact that those entities do pay. My question for you folks, as we have this discussion, is how much, I think the supervisors should be aware of this. Number two, I think that $13,000 is not even close to the amount of consumption these collective places, not only places that pay, the places that do not pay, using township services or resources. I think it's something that we should consider moving forward as this group and as we advise the Board of Supervisors to, get its arms around a little bit.
I will also do a little bit of research as to, and I'll ask for some legal assistance in this, as to how pilots are implemented, so that, if we find out there are some limits in how that's done, and there are some structures around that, and so we can discuss whether or not we have the ability to even do certain things.
And I get that completely. I just want to bring it up as a topic and an issue, and we'll get some information. We'll consume that information, make some determinations. Maybe we put together a small working group to figure out the best approach. So that's a good step one, Stephen. I appreciate that. And it gives us a chance to figure out what we want to do next.
The idea, I don't think is, in my view, wouldn't be to twist anybody's arm too much. I mean, the idea is simply to, if just by publishing this, it's not just the supervisors that need to know this. I think this is an interesting point for all of the township
absolutely.
people to know, because some of them are members of these groups, and they might say, hey, yeah, let's provide something, to the township to work with. So, how we approach it is important, right? I understand that. I mean, you don't want to come out blazing, but at the same time, there's no harm in explaining to our residents that, hey, here's all these entities that own land, that don't pay taxes or pay small pilot amount. You should be aware of this, and we would appreciate, it would be helpful to the town if some of them did it on their own, and that internal pressure from their own residents might do the trick. It's a great idea.
Steve, with respect to Episcopal, if we could pick on them a little bit, does Newtown Township Police, other than an emergency call, they have any responsibility to patrol there?
I mean, we have a responsibility to all property owners within the township to be patrolling, right? So for me to say, no, there's no responsibility at all, would be wrong. But like, we're not necessarily, I do not believe that we're there like we are at the school district. I mean, we are walking through the school district building. I know we have an officer there all the time. We have a school resource officer. We've talked about that. But in addition to that, we have patrol that go through the school district, different buildings throughout the day. I would have to do some research to know whether we're doing that same thing at Episcopal. I don't know that we've been invited in to do that. Whether we do that same thing at Delaware County Christian School, I don't know that. I do know that as they had need, they have chosen on times to bring officers in to support their security staff, both locations.
Is there a per diem that?
And then there's a charge that gets charged, just like if
Special event.
like Bernardi Jewelers during the Christmas rush, I think we do some additional support for them. And so during that time, there's a fee that they pay the township related to the
Patrol that's
officers.
in front of the seafood stand on.
Yes,
I was about to
exactly.
say,
Yeah.
who knew seafood was that hot of a commodity
Yeah.
around Christmas time?
But yeah, so those are some examples. Those are some examples that, where there are groups that do hire the police to add security during specific times. And that's oftentimes like if there's a large event, those kind of things. Another example would be at, like when the golf outing is here. And we actually don't have enough officers to do that, we actually have to go out, and we have officers from all over the
Neighboring
county
townships, yeah.
that come in to help supply the support for that kind of an event.
You know, it's interesting when Tiger was still playing, he was there. He had John Newell and a cop from Upper Darby on his body the whole time during the tournament. Because there's a guy who needs additional security. So it's obviously I had to go out to other towns and get all the resources.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So, I mean, we have cooperating agreements with those townships, and, you know, our officers do the same thing when they have that. And then the event that's having that is the one that pays at least the major portion of that.
Again, but
cost.
these are all event driven things. These
Yeah.
are not normal ways.
These
of
are not
doing
normal
business.
things.
And again, all I want to do is, I appreciate the fact that you folks are interested in pursuing this to a larger degree. We just need to investigate it, you know, to the level we disclose, have folks understand. I just think it's something that's worth doing. And I don't want it to be a county driven thing, because no disrespect to the people working in the county, but that tends to be a politically driven. That's not our goal. Our goal is to, you know, look it up, inform people we need to, and move forward as we have to. And how the auditors handle stuff like this is a different conversation as well.
This is an event that's this is an issue that's going on in Radnor Township right now with Ambrosia.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge issue.
So, you know, personally and professionally know the supervisor on Radnor, Rich Booker, who's leading the charge
Yeah.
against why is this happening?
Really interesting conversation. You guys aware of what's going on there? So there's the Montgomery estate.
Oh,
They have structured it in a very tax efficient way.
Unique.
Yes. And it meets, they actually engaged an outside party to structure the sale of the land. So it's effectively farms, you know, huge parcels that are operated as farms. You know, it's a 20-acre farming operation and a lovely 10-acre estate attached. And they've structured in a way that the township retains a degree of open space, and rich guys get a chance to build estates. Probably zero.
At an
tax.
agricultural
Yeah.
millage rate.
So
It gets more interesting. The guy leases the township to feed his cattle or to grow the grain
For $1.
that sells to the farmers so they can maintain. their
Leases for
farm.
$1.
that's right. It's
That's what I was
a,
gonna ask
it is a
next.
very
What's
well
going on?
structured, well investigated
Yeah.
concept. It's well within the realms of the law, because I'm sure everybody kicked the tires on it.
Mhm.
And there's a gentleman on the commissioners and Radnor Township like, doing what? You know, and the other supervisors are saying, you know, guys, we've got a great open space deal here. Let's leave it alone. Otherwise it can be, I mean, it's got to be 1,000 acres. A bunch of it was given to sold to the township at below market rates to ensure that this project passed. That's very interesting. It's all down Darby Bailey Road and
Newtown Road.
in Newtown Road. Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, it was this close to becoming a new townish. Can you imagine if that land was here? Newsstands outside of it. So anyway, yeah, so
I always consider it a very good day when there's no news vans outside. Every day that we don't have one outside is a win as far as I'm concerned.
all right, so we got a little bit of a game plan here. Things we'll do going forward. There's nothing to move on, discuss, have a motion.
So I think at this point, we know what you're asking for.
Yeah.
We will get some things together. The good news is we have 2 months to provide it to you, so we'll work on that.
So there's no emergency meetings between now and June. All right, so on
If
to
you
the
get it
next.
done earlier, you could circulate. Absolutely. Just saying.
Screw the budget. Okay, the other thing we have going on is I had lunch with Rich recently. Poor man had to watch me eat. It's not a beautiful thing, but you know, the last meeting we had, we talked about one of my struggles is how we tie budget, which we do a fine job of managing. I'm not questioning that, but you know, my experience in the private sector has always been how you keep score, and for-profit entities keep score with profits and losses, but you know, that's only the result. It's not telling you how you get there. A lot of companies make that mistake. Hey, we got to go raise revenue, so we need to reduce our expenses. Well, you know, there's a lot of things you need to do how you operate the business. So, you know, I spent a lot of time in my career doing corporate strategy stuff, And when you build a good strategy, you have a good scorecard to come. Very common practice, balanced scorecard is very commonly used tool, not only in commercial businesses, but also starting to come in public enterprises. I did a little research, looked at what other entities do, mostly larger cities. And thank God the internet exists, because you can find all best practices and case studies and things like that. So anyway, so Rich and I sat down and we talked about, I gave him examples and things, and I put together a really quick deck that he can use as a straw model. But, the thinking is, especially here with some of the challenges that you guys have discussed in the course of the year, how can we help do two things? One, provide better information and not better provide the information to the supervisors. And two, better inform the community about it. Because I look, for example, we have a great group of people put together a strategic plan. Well, the strategic plan is this big. And it's all strategy driven, it's not goal driven. And one thing we need to focus on, how can we become more quantifiably goal driven to determine, hey, you know what, that's a really good idea that we're doing that, but how are we going to measure its effectiveness? So what balanced scorecards do is two things. It measures the effectiveness of the things that you're doing to produce financial reports, all the things that go into it. And two, it helps better evaluate how the different initiatives you have are doing, so you can report to the community, report to the supervisors, and whomever else is interested about how you're performing on those things. So I'm not here to tell you that the only way, to evaluate initiative A is to put this number on it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is that we should evaluate initiative A by putting a number on it and keeping score, and having that score be reported. So that's the fundamental of what I sat down and talked to Rich about. And it's not a, hey, here's what we have now, let's go resolve it. It's really, it's my advice kind of a thing. And I took that off the last meeting. So I don't know how we move forward with that other than, you have the recommendation, you have the approaches, and we determine what the best, course of action is to take from here. Does any of you folks have any opinion on that? Beyond that?
Yeah, I'm thinking 2 years from now, year and a half from now, when there's going to be very tough discussions around revenue. And the knee-jerk reaction, typical knee-jerk reactions. Well, the administration is bloated. We need to cut costs. So I think from the administration's perspective and the supervisor's perspective, this is going to become important to be able to be in front of typical pushback that we have so much money, all this building went on, all this money has to be sitting in a pot. And it would be prudent to think about being able to have objective measurements in terms of what people do and how well they perform.
Would you build this?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed.
I apologize. I didn't mean that we're going to put out everybody's scorecard. I think it needs more to be what the township is doing to be able to objectively demonstrate to anybody who's interested that we're not running a bloated government. We want to head that off.
So, and if I can just, jump in here a minute in this discussion in regards to, I just want to understand, I think that as we have looked at this, a concept of scorecard, our focus has been the scorecard really towards programming, not towards individuals. And so I guess I just want to understand, is the finance team thinking differently in that because to me, the thing that, what Rich and I talked about is, and what actually what GFOA is looking for in this Government Financial Association, Officers Association, with the budget piece that we submit every year is, how are you measuring success of programs? That's what they're looking for. And that was really where our target was going to be. But I'm hearing a little bit something different. And so I just want to make sure I understand what this group is kind of recommending as we go forward. Going back, Tom introduced himself earlier. This is something that they did very actively in Greenwich. And so we're hoping to bring his expertise into what we're doing and really look at how do we apply this. We see this as something that we add some every year to grow, like instead of going into 2022 with 100 different scores that we're trying to look at, we're probably going to start out with 3 for every department kind of thing, with the idea that we will add as we go and we'll get better at it. We'll start really understanding how to do it, use this year, use the term, but kind of as a pilot. But
That's why acronyms are bad things.
but we use this year kind of as a starting point to really start to get that and start to give the data out and start seeing how people react to the data that we're giving. And we saw it more as a program based and in that way, but I just want to understand what you're all.
Sure. No, it fundamentally, it's 2 things. It's program based and it's really performance based.
Sure.
Okay. So for example, a common credit, there's 4 different, ways you look at it: financial, people, and then the other 2 generally tend to be based on the nature of your business. But financial people always do. So for example, we have very basic fundamental financial measurements that we can use on an objective basis to evaluate how we're performing financially. An easy one is, okay, what's our fund balance? Other ones are, receivables rate of collection, different things. Again, you guys know the business better than I do. Right? On the people side, you can look at turnover, you can look at, the percent that the pension is funded, things like that, again, to evaluate how you're doing towards those goals. So some of these things, you ask me, you could probably knock out 8 to 10 of them in those 2 categories like that, because it's just the way you do the business.
Right.
And you know what they are. Right? The other ones, when you start to get into operating issues, some people look at it from a customer perspective, which is the way I've always seen it. For example, do you have customer satisfaction ratings? Do you have net promoter scores, which measure customer loyalty, things like that, all of which some of which are things that you need to create an initiative for. For example, if you want to look at customer loyalty, well, you got to put something in place to go do that. It can't just be an opinion. So the way I look at it is, yes, you start small and you start in a manageable way, but you start in a way that it makes it what matters to the community at large, and what helps feed the supervisors to help them make decisions. To your point, there are going to be certain things we're going to be able to manage and look at up front and say, look, and by the way you measure these things are red, green, and yellow, good, bad, and okay, right, or on pace, or whatever you want to refer to it as. If you start seeing things that are green across the board, you're in a pretty good place. But if your financial measures are yellow or red, the basic fundamentals, holy crap, we got to do something about this. So it's really these are all leading indicators as to how you have to do things. And to your point about, we may have to worry a little bit about, how we're doing financially and how we're going to have to manage this thing in a revenue constrained environment. Well, yeah, that's when you have to start making some hard decisions, but you need to be communicating that in a way that's proactive and offsets the pervasive opinion of, oh, you guys must have millions of dollars. Look at all the building that you're doing, even though we get 1/2 of 1% of our quarter of 1/8 of a percent of the money. So did I capture that fairly well?
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
From my perspective, I got to keep in mind what we are. We're not a shadow board of supervisors. We're the finance committee. Eye on the finances of the district. We start getting into individual performance measures of employees, then
Yeah, that's not-
No, we're not going there.
Because
No.
that's human resources stuff that
No,
I
that's-
have no interest in dealing with. And how do we keep the revenue in line with what the township needs? I think our role in particular is to spend a lot more time thinking about the future, like exactly what these guys are talking about and how we're going to fund things we need down the road and that kind of thing. I just want us to be mindful of what our task is.
That's a really valid point. And my whole point about it is I'm looking for a better way to report on the performance of the township.
Sure.
In a way that's consistent and frankly, using a recognized tool to do so. And the nice thing about it, it sounds like just before, like the county press, right? Just before we talked about this, Rich actually went to a seminar through one of his groups
And that's
talking
good.
about how this is
Yeah.
done. So, it's timely not only from us bringing it up, but if it's something that's being done, let's take advantage of it. And it sounds like your performance management experience comes to play as well, because it's not hard to do. The only hard part is picking what measures to evaluate. But the work itself, it pretty much, we can have outputs all the time, do we?
You want to chime in here? Do you want to chime in? I mean, we're happy.
It's turned up real loud, so.
We're happy to hear if you have any comments on this topic.
I think that there's another aspect.
Tom, you want to stand up at the podium?
I'll bring them up.
Okay.
One of the most critical things is certainly the financials and where we stand with that and so on. But are we serving the needs of the community? What is it they're looking for that we may or may not be doing? And how well are we doing it? What things would they like to see going forward to improve what our deliverables are? And, that's another whole aspect, surveys and that kind of thing. Very important. And things like a way to communicate with the community on a consistent basis. What are we doing? How are we doing it? And getting them involved. For example, I moved in, I talked to the gentleman there. I said, gee whiz, I'm used to a significant amount of recreation stuff, features and so on and so forth. Now, because I'm new to the community, I'm not really familiar with what's available and so on, but I've talked to some of their neighbors and so on, and they give me the same kind of reaction. Maybe that's something that we ought to look at. But so the point is, the gentleman, Jim was right. I mean, those are the things we really need to do. But I would add that, are we serving the community with what their expectations are? They're paying a tax? Let's not go there again, but.
No, but that's really important, because if you're going to reach out to folks and say, what is it that you're looking for from the township? And let's just play around and say, supposing that survey comes back that 60% want to see more parks and rec. There's an obvious follow-up question to that. Would you be willing to pay more in taxes in order for the township to provide more parks and rec services?
Sure.
Everybody would love a free ride, but there's no free ride. And that's where I think sometimes the surveys miss.
So you got to be really careful about that.
Yeah.
So would we have a separate committee that could work on this, like similar to what we do for the capital budget, or do we not need that?
Here's what I would recommend if I can. Let Rich and I, we want to take and use finance as an example because we think it's, to be honest with you, it's probably an easy one to start out.
That's generally where people start with these things.
Yeah. So we're going to start with finance. He and I have already talked. We're going to try to get something done in the next week here that we put together. We'll send it out to you as a kind of a review. We'll have to send it out and we'll say, you can't respond to all. If you want to respond back to us, respond back individually, because if you respond back all, we got a Sunshine Act issue. But we're going to be working on that. We're going to be getting that. And then at the January meeting, we'll get it kind of finalized and we'll have it in place so that when we present, Rich has 60 days and it looks like 60 days, 30 days.
I think it might be 90.
Oh, you have 90 days from the end of the
It's
budget?
either 60 or 90 to hand in the budget document.
So he has that period of time. So we're going to be looking at getting all the departments done within the next 60 to 90 days. Because we anticipate the budgets, we're going to talk about budget update here in a bit. We anticipate the budget's going to be passed somewhere around December 27th or something. So that's the plan this year. And so we're working on that, but we're trying to get finance kind of things out front. And so if you want to get feedback on that, we'll work with Tom, get some, work on that, get that, try to get a really solid document there. I think once we do that, looking at it in light of where the strategic plan, the overall goals of the strategic plan are we aiming at those things? And then we'll tie some of that back together. Like I said, I'm looking at trying to walk away with, 15, 20, for the first year. Just,
Anything more than that, you start to get overwhelmed.
I'm talking to, we talk to other groups, they're talking about 130,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, I don't ever want to hit 130. I want things that matter, that make a difference, and they're done well.
And by the way, you can push a lot of that stuff downstream,
Yeah.
but you report on 10 to 15.
Yeah.
Right. So you may, for example, Suzanne may want to have metrics within the HR function, but they don't matter to the community, nor do they matter. Well, should they matter to anybody? Because a lot of times it's stuff you want to keep in-house. But things that really matter that are community-based and report worthy, that's what you do.
Yeah.
You currently do have metrics now so that when police service is not meeting a standard that you would like when calls aren't answered, those sorts of things right now?
We have a basic, we know, we don't watch so much with the police because typically I don't have a response time issue on the police, but I do watch on the ambulance some. We do keep we keep a closer eye on some of those. Typically with our police officers, they're there very quickly. And so I haven't really spent a lot of time going, is that getting too wide? Because I've always said, typically it's done real well. So, but we do watch where we think, like in the emergency situations. One of the challenges we have is, somebody calls in, and so everything in Pennsylvania, but in Delaware County in particular, everything goes to the 911 center. If you just want the officer to show up to your house to take a report on something, it has to go through 911, period. If you want to even see an officer right out here, we send it, even if you're just wanting to talk about, whatever you want to know about the police.
It's an odd request. When somebody asks and you say, well, can you
You
dial
say
911?
dial
Or you
911,
right in front
and
of the police
it's
department.
really been an education issue. But so sometimes the response to certain things is very slow because the request is not an emergency.
Well, they triage.
Yeah, we have to do triage based on how the request is made. And so sometimes, what works well is the fact that we have really good folks at the 911 center in the county who are able to determine whether the officer needs to be there in 2 minutes or the officer could be there in 15 minutes kind of thing. And we've watched that. We know how many calls we're getting. We watch more on the number of calls that to make sure that we have the proper staffing to
Right,
meet
and
the
that's what I
number
was
of calls.
thinking,
Yeah,
the direction for the police.
Yeah. that's how we would look at it.
And for the
And
road clearing and leaf pickup,
yeah,
you have metrics around that.
yeah, we know how many, just to digress for a minute, and I will make it short, but George and I are having this oh crud moment. We are halfway through leaf collection and we are incredibly behind in tonnage. And so we really do believe that the next 4 weeks that we collect, which will be starting in the beginning of December, right after Thanksgiving, will be so heavy because the leaves have stayed on the trees really late. And so we're having, and that's one of the things we're watching and trying to, we look at those metrics all the time and understanding.
Anything we can do about the leaves, like tell them to wait a little bit?
Oh.
Well, actually, I want them to come down.
Yeah,
That's,
you want it,
the thing is, I would like them to all be down because then we could go do our job and it would be easy.
Can we pass an ordinance that all?
Whole leaves come down?
Let me know how that works.
Steve, just on that off topic, did you guys start earlier this year? Because I was the first street picked up, I think, this year, and my leaves were out there on that first Monday, and it was like 6 leaves. And I was the only one on the street because all the leaves were still up there. I remember thinking, this is so stupid. I had this little pile of leaves in the front of my driveway. You know, now, of course, it's a different story, but you're not picking up till.
We picked up earlier than we did last year.
Yeah,
Because last year we only, if you'll recall, we only did one pickup.
that's right.
And it was a lot more structured and that. But this year, we went back to the schedule that we used in prior years. It's just, we had a warm fall. And even when we've had the cold spells, they haven't lasted very long. And so the leaves are just, behind.
I can't, it's an old cranky old man thing, but I can't figure out why my leaves haven't fallen, but my neighbors have. Right, and they're all coming to my house. I'm really pissed off about that.
Well, we have a conspiracy out for Jim. That's the thing. I mean, we've talked to all your neighbors.
There are
They
conspiracies
go out
afoot
and
in my
shake their
household.
tree every night.
And the wind only blows southerly, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They sweep it onto your property.
And now that we covered the important issues of the day, let's move on to old business. Capital improvement plan update.
Okay. So we met on Monday and we recommend that during 2022, a plan should be developed, including passing of an ordinance to allow the township to assess a stormwater tax or fee. This will require supervisor support and special public meetings to be held to provide background and receive feedback from the community. The tax/fee would be rolled out in 2023. So we're recommending that the year of 2022 be spent focusing on that. And in the meantime, that the American Rescue Plan funds should be used for immediate infrastructure needs with stormwater. And in addition, the infrastructure bill that just passed is being reviewed for opportunities for stormwater funding.
To fill in the blank, there's $1.5 million that the township has received rescue plan that can be used for immediate purposes, obviously subject to supervisors. So, but we're looking at building a program similar to what's done with the road program. There's a funding mechanism that occurs annually that will provide requisite funds to be able to address ongoing as well as emergency situations.
So even to back this up a little further, I'm not sure if everybody saw, our engineer came out with a report 2 weeks ago that had about $23 million in existing stormwater infrastructure that we owned. Quickly doing
There
the
would
math.
be improvements that would
Yeah.
require improvements.
Yeah,
Yes.
stormwater, we know a life expectancy of stormwater systems is about 50 years.
Really?
Yeah. So we're managing to that 50-year cycle. And although they are doing some things that I think are going to make it last longer as we go forward, but right now we're managing to about a 50-year. Anything that was put in 50 years ago is about coming to its life cycle, particularly if it was the old galvanized metal, that stuff.
So
even
it's
though
like so belt fatigue and stuff like that.
well, and it actually does rust at some point
Yeah.
and collapses and all of those good things. And so, in fact, we've got that situation right out here in our own parking lot.
So do
So
we need a
we're,
separate tax as opposed to just rolling it into the regular does it mean certain people will pay the tax and certain people won't?
Well, those are some of the things that need to be worked out. And the reason there's a need to consider the tax or fee is that the dollar amount is significant. So if we can allocate an annual amount toward the capital reserve fund, we would be putting funds aside to pay for these repairs and replacements in addition to new stormwater management issues that come up, and we'll have the funding there to do it. Up till now, there have been no funds set aside for this.
So going back to your, really, I think, trying to get at what you're trying to get at, there are a couple different ways to approach it. One is to do it just based off of your assessment. And those who have a higher assessment pay a higher percentage towards that. The other way is to say every household is going to be treated the same. If you're a household, you're going to contribute X number of dollars. And I'm going to throw a number out there. Let's say it's $75 a year that you're going to pay towards this. But then maybe for businesses, that anything that's a commercial property, we would base it off of the percentage of impervious coverage that they have on their property, or the amount of square foot of impervious coverage. Or we might do that for everybody. You know, we look at the total amount of impervious square footage that you have on your property, and that's what the fee is based off of, because that's really what impacts stormwater, right? And so, or has a major impact on stormwater. So yes, we could make it a tax, but the tax would then be based off assessment. If you make it a fee, it could be based off of closer to what is the cause of the issue. And that's the reason why you look at it that way.
Or another way to do it, of course, is for those neighborhoods that have insufficient stormwater management because they did a crappy job of doing their stormwater management, and they're simply a victim of not necessarily other building, but because of climate change and such, you know, they should pay a higher percentage than somebody who might reside on the top of a hill.
Point understood. And that may be absolutely how you go to it. It's the challenge that you have in all of this. It's kind of, it's coming up with the right balance in the process, as we do with anything. So when we look at roadways, we charge the tax for road improvements to everyone, right?
Right.
But not everyone. Some people would argue, and I'll give myself as an example. I live in a HOA, and we take care of our own roads in the HOA. But I am a citizen of the township, and I get the benefit of all the public roads in the township to get around. And so that's my contribution that I make. And am I getting the same benefit to my house? Well, from the time I enter my HOA, I pay an extra tax to do that to my HOA. But so there are some benefits that we pay for as taxpayers from time to time that we don't personally get benefit of. Some people don't use recreation services, and we give money to recreation. Some people don't use the library, and we give money to the library. We all pay taxes for things that we don't use as part of that. What we're looking for is what's the most fair way to look at what the impact is, because the person on top of the hill may actually be part of the cause for the people at the bottom of the hill with the water that they're getting.
Could be. But once you start imposing a tax and you call it a one-time tax, it never becomes that. It becomes like
I don't think
toll on the highway.
I don't think we have any intention of it being a one-time tax. I think the intent would be that,
A permanent go every year tax.
what we believe, so here's what we know. We know today there's 23 million of structure in the road or under the roads that we don't see today that has need of attention of some level. And some of it is hit its life cycle and needs to be replaced today. Some of it we know we've got another 10 years. Some of it we know we have another 20 years. We also know that in certain communities, there was never enough stormwater put in the first place. And so the question becomes, and as you made the comment, is that part of their individual assessment, or is some of it a community assessment? We went back actually Larry will probably remember this. We had this actual whole discussion about streetlights, you know, and we discussed whether or not only the people who live near a streetlight should pay for a streetlight tax, or does everybody get benefit of streetlights? And so, because if you drive up and down Route 3 or 252, which most of us do at some point in our time in the township, you get the benefit of streetlights. So we have a percentage of dollars that everybody pays. We put some money towards streetlights that we say covers for everybody, because everybody's getting the benefit of that on the public, high public areas. And so we may look at some areas and say, yes, this is going to be very specific. And in some areas, we're going to say, but everybody benefits. So we're going to do stormwater here, and it's going to be much broader.
We pay a separate streetlight tax, right?
People who have streetlights pay a separate streetlight tax, yes.
And that streetlight tax is earmarked solely for streetlights. It doesn't
Solely for
get
that
used
purpose.
anything else.
Correct.
That's correct.
Doesn't get bounced to another fund.
If we put it in another fund, we have obligation. I mean, like, it's a thing on us.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, that can really be
And
serious.
this gets back to your basic question. Should it be a separate identifiable, or should it be part of the ongoing budget process? Because the number is so big, it really needs to stand out so people will see it, and it will take it out of the annual budget give and take. Is it going to be funded? Is it not going to be funded? You want to have that dedicated, because if the road collapses, everybody's going to want it fixed tomorrow morning. You got to be ready, besides the stuff that you know is fixed.
I think that's the reason why we're saying this needs to be studied over the next year.
I think that's.
We need to have public comment being made on it as we put it together. We need to be honest with you, we need to understand what it takes to fix what's wrong today. And I'm not talking about with the infrastructure that's there. I'm talking about, like you're mentioning, we have neighborhoods that are flooding today. The question is, who's responsible and how are we going to fix it?
Oh, okay. Now I misunderstood what we were recommending. I thought we were recommending a tax or a separate. Are we just recommending a study? Can I see the text of what we're actually recommending?
We're recommending that during 2022, we work on a plan that will result in some sort of an ordinance. We could say possibly result in an ordinance to assess a tax. So we're considering our recommendation is to spend the full year 2022 considering this plan, and then in 2023, if there is a tax or a fee that is the outcome,
Okay.
it would become applicable.
Can I just get you to actually read the wording as opposed to the intent?
Yes, so I am saying that during 2022, a plan should be developed, including, let's say, the consideration of passing an ordinance to allow the township to assess a stormwater tax or fee. This will require supervisor support, and special public meetings will be held to provide background and receive feedback. The tax/fee would be rolled out in 2023. And then in the meantime, the American Rescue Plan funds that have been received, we recommend they be used to address immediate needs in stormwater. And in addition, we're looking at the infrastructure bill that just passed. The township's doing that to see if there's opportunities to get some funding towards stormwater.
Thank you. And just for discussion, I'm gonna vote no on that, just because of the way it's worded. But I understand what everybody's doing, I get it. It sounds to me too much like we pre-decided that a tax is necessary, because even the second sentence says the tax would be rolled out in 2022. It's like, to me, it's way.
We're just recommending this to Steve to take to the supervisor as a plan. We don't have the authority. The supervisors would have to direct you basically to start some procedure.
What is legally permissible and what would be their preference?
Yeah, I think the key that we're looking at, I mean, here's what I think we would say, and I would hope we all agree. There has to be some funding of this infrastructure. How we get there is part of that determination. You know, whether it becomes part of the general budget that we just start, you know, do like we do the road program. We don't have a separate fund for road program. We just keep adding, and we've done that. And that may be the answer here. The reason typically why you take something like this and break it out is and as I shared with the subcommittee, second-class township code is different than other municipal codes. We may or may not be able to do something separate anyhow. It may have to be just out of the general fund because separate, huh?
I looked that up and we can. It is-
Okay, good.
Yeah, I looked that up yesterday.
So, you know, it's one of those things we just have to look at, and we have to be within certain parameters. I'm typically a person who says, put it in the general fund. And then that way, if the money's not needed in that area, you can use it for any area which you want to use it. This area here is just so big that it's the only reason. It's kind of like the street light, even though the street light's much smaller, it is a very specific expense. And I do anticipate that until there, we have three areas that I look at with this. We have what's existing, what we talked about, what's new that needs to be put in. And we have MS4 requirements. And when we talk about that, that's our, you know, requirements that come in from the state. And there's actually it comes in from the federal government. But it's a mandate of our managing, particularly of our waterways. And we have certain things we have to do to look at the quality of water, not just what's coming in, but what the quality is and how we're managing the quality of what's entering our streams and things like that. And so, I mean, the numbers are greater than most of our infrastructure for everything else we do. And that's the reason why.
I totally get that, and I'm on board with it, that we need to study it. If we had a more general recommendation of
Gotcha.
the board that simply said, there's a significant charge coming up that we see on this thing, we need to somehow fund it, let's set up and study it, then I'm on board. But once in the recommendation, we start talking about, and maybe a separate tax, I don't think we even need to go there yet, because we haven't figured out because you should put in that, then all the different options, which is separate
Okay.
tax, a general tax, or
Okay.
some other mechanism. And so, to me personally,
If we said, and
you don't have to
they-
change it for me.
but I think that there is, I think that you're bringing up a valid point, and I'm guessing others might feel the same. My question is, if we can say, just explore all funding options,
Amen.
does that take care of your concern?
Absolutely, it does.
I think that addresses that, and
And
probably,
taking out the second sentence completely. Yes, okay. And I do have the township code, the second class, it's section 1508, that talks about a capital reserve fund and that the Board of Supervisors may create that to pay for capital needs. It would be very, you know, specific purpose, and it could be funded by operating or other, you know, amounts paid in through tax, or actually it also cites the sale, lease, or other disposition of township property, that you could take those funds and put them into a capital
yeah,
reserve.
the place where I'm questioning is actually whether or not the township has the authority to do a fee. That becomes much more of a question.
Mhm.
Sometimes we only have authority to do taxes, and we don't have authority to do fees. And so that would be the place where I would have to, that's what I was talking about looking into. I know we have the authority to tax. We always have the authority to tax. Well, not always, but most of the time we have the authority to tax, but it does become a question about authority to issue a fee. And that's the reason why some municipalities create municipal authorities to deal with stormwater, because then they have the authority to have a fee related to it.
Okay. All right, so I'm saying, the recommendation during 2022, a plan should be developed to understand stormwater needs and related sources of funding. This will require supervisor support. Specific public meetings will be held and to provide background and receive feedback. The American Rescue Plan funds will be used in for immediate needs. And we're looking for other opportunities through the new infrastructure bill.
Okay.
Good.
I'm on
Thank
board.
you. Thank you.
No, that's good. That's why you have discussion, right? So may I have a motion to recommend said recommendation to the Board of Supervisors?
Make a motion to approve the recommendation that I stated.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Let's move on to the budget status update, sir.
Very quickly, because I know we're running late. So just so you know, the board chose not to advertise the budget at the last meeting. One of the big pieces that was in question was the recycling piece of the contract. We didn't know what that was going to be because we had rejected the bids prior. No good deed goes unturned. We've gone back out. I can tell you that the bids are not what we had hoped for. So I don't know what the board's going to decide Monday night. We'll find out and we'll give, we're going to make some recommendations from our standpoint. But that's kind of where we are at this point. We anticipate that they'll give us the authority to advertise because time-wise, we're running out of time. We have to have a budget passed by December 31st. And so if we don't advertise at this meeting, we'll be having special meetings to do that because we have to have 20 days. And then if we make any substantial changes, we would do that. We think we're down probably to about a $60,000 gap at this point, even with what depending on how they make a decision on Monday night, we're down to about a $60,000 gap.
So if you say take a 10% pay cut, you'll close that gap.
If you want to pay me so that I can take a 10% pay cut, so that I can close the gap, I would be happy to do that for you.
See, that's the kind of positive thinking we need.
Yes.
Is recycling, you say trash pickup and recycling, or
Just recycling. If I said trash pickup, I apologize.
So does any of that fall back on what the county decides? The trash distribution is trash. That's going on down in Chester. I mean, maybe.
The answer that I would tell you is for us, we have a requirement in recycling, and I don't necessarily. I mean, I know they're using trash to energy to say that they're meeting part of the recycling requirements. I would have to look, but my understanding of what our requirement for recycling is that we must recycle 3 products. So for example, we recycle way more than 3, but like you might have cardboard, glass, plastic, paper, the different levels of plastic, there's those kind of things. I don't think that we could take that out and make that happen, but I would have to look at it.
Thank you for that update. Any public comment? Anybody online? Any items for the next agenda? And keep in mind that if we do want items for our next agenda, we do have a statute that we need to focus on. Our next meeting is not for 2 months, but keep that in mind if you have any ideas that come up. So any ideas, items, issues, thought processes?
We'll send out a reminder ahead of time because of the gap.
Anybody? All right. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you all.
Have a great
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
Have a good Thanksgiving and great holiday.
Christmas.
Yeah, right.
My kitchen is in renovation